Shelley was the founding editor-in-chief of Swerve, one of my favorite magazines, the Calgary Herald's weekly magazine, which won 65 national, take a big breath here, 65 national, international, and regional awards, and 115 nominations under her direction. She was most recently the Western editor of the Globe and Mail. Please welcome Shelley.
Hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here. I recognize some familiar faces, some people that I've always wanted to meet, and some people that I hope to meet in the future. So I'm here, and hopefully we'll have a really good conversation about what I think is probably the big issue for all of us right now who want to figure out how to make a living being curious for a living. And it's not just, bloggers or independent publishers who are dealing with all these issues right now. I mean, it's the big guys too. And so the question of, how do we pay for really great content and how do we, serve our readers has become, I think, like the burning issue of our time. So just very quickly, this particular webinar is being sponsored by AMPA, obviously, and they get some money from the Government of Canada, and they also get some money from the Alberta Multimedia Development Fund. And, I just want to stop for 1 second here. So I got these new glasses, and I really, really love my glasses. I got them from a local company. They're called Brass Monocle, and they're independent. They've been around for 20 years. I mean, they're kind of a great local business. And, I just want to share that with you, and I just want to talk about, how I'm not the only one out there who loves, geeky glasses, like Justin Timberlake, Scarlett Johansson, Robert Downey Jr., and Chloe Sevigny. And anybody feeling just a little bit uncomfortable yet? Well, the reason I'm doing this is because Brass Monocle, they actually paid me. This is like a sponsored post in my webinar. And they want to give me money so that when you guys are sorry, just 1 second. My screen just went away. Oh, there we go. I guess they don't even want to have me, selling for you guys. There we go. So it's kind of a joke that I'm trying to make, but it's also a way for making us all figure out what our comfort zone is with this idea of sponsored posts. So if I told you that because the Brass Monocle paid me to wear my glasses, you're going to get a discount. You didn't have to pay your fee, for example, to go to this webinar. Would you feel any better about it? Would you feel worse? In my particular case, I feel really, really skeevy right now, and I wish I hadn't done this. So that should give you some sense of where I'm coming from in terms of this whole question of, sponsored content. So where we are right now is we're in the new Wild West, and I'm kind of thinking of it in my own mind as Deadwood. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the HBO series, but let's just say anything went. It was set in the gold rush. There was no law. There were no rules. It was all about getting your piece of the pie. And the slug line was a hell of a place to make your fortune. And I don't think that's an inaccurate slogan for the situation that we all find ourselves in right now. So staking your claims to the, and I use the word potentially here very strategically because it's like we all want to believe that there's this golden goose and that, somehow we can make easy money again in publishing. And I think it's potential, but it's not necessarily a given. So these are potentially rich veins of added. So that's my way of saying, capital A, lowercase e, added content. So there's advertorials, and I think we're all pretty familiar with them. They're when an advertiser pays you to, write something about them, and you publish it in your magazine. And or newspaper or whatever, and it's been around forever. We've all done them. Some can be done extremely well. I've worked on many of them. I did a lot for ESPN, which might come as a surprise to people, although ESPN has been, so, how do I put it, integrated into their content of sports that the ad edit blur has the line blurred ages ago. So later in the presentation, I'm going to show you some advertorials that I've worked on that I think were really successful. There's custom content. So that's where it's kind of nice. It's almost like having a benefactor. So somebody would come to you, like say Lexus or Mercedes-Benz or Lincoln. Interesting how it's almost always car companies. And they will give you a whole bunch of money, and you will write stories. They will not have any approval. They will not have any input into the stories, but you're creating an environment that they want to be part of. So, for example, Lexus years ago sponsored an entire green issue of the New Yorker. I mean, it's not like the really, really high-end magazines haven't done this. And it's nice, right? They pay, you publish, everybody's happy. But now we've kind of blurred into sponsored content, and what sponsored content means is that you basically are creating something that's very, very engaged with the advertiser. And so one person out there said that it's basically advertorial without all the me. So it's supposed to be reader-oriented, audience-oriented, but you're basically allowing them to call the shots as they pay the bills. Commerce content we'll get into in a bit. I think it's really interesting. I also don't think it's necessarily anything new. Sponsored posts would be the online equivalent of sponsored content. Sponsored tweets, I mean, yes, you can get paid, for example, for tweeting on somebody's behalf. So it's kind of like the celebrity endorsements of days gone by, except in this case, what you're doing is you're being paid as an expert or as a celebrity to tweet something. So for example, Snoop Dogg did an ad, a sponsored tweet for Toyota, and it said, "These homies know the deal." And then at the very end, it was supposed to be hashtagged ad. And then Jenny McCarthy did one for Arby's roast beef sandwiches, and she called out to ladies who might be PMSing like I am. I think we've all seen, all those really funny celebrity ads in Japan or in Spain where, George Clooney is flogging this or Brad Pitt is flogging that. And it's interesting to me that they do them overseas where their, core audience isn't, because I think even they know that there's something a little bit uncomfortable about being a spokesperson. But at the end of the day, they're celebrities, they get paid, they do this. I think for a lot of bloggers, what's happening right now is they're becoming experts in their field, and their word means something. So, when, let's just say, I see Julie Van Rosendaal's on our list, so Julie's a food blogger here in town. If Julie were to come out and say, I just went to Arby's, for all my friends who might be PMSing like I am, for $225, she's now promoting Arby's. I can't imagine that Julie would, but she could in this new, Wild West environment. Pinterest, I think everybody's sort of getting the idea right now that, there's Facebook, there's Google, but it's Pinterest that seems to be driving the most traffic and the most engagement online right now amongst particular audiences. And so you can also do a sponsored pin. So somebody might come to a design blogger and say, I want you to pin my latest room. I want you to pin my latest rug, whatever, and you get paid for that. So all of that is up for grabs right now. Directory listings. This is, basically, it's the yellow pages, right? I mean, it's all been done. We're just now recycling it and trying to figure out how to reinterpret it for the digital age and the current, economic environment. But they really are in some ways an implied endorsement, and so you should get paid for it. So you can basically, you can do this in a really crass way, and you can do it in a really elegant way. And I'm going to show you later a particular website that does it in, I think, a really great way that really understands its audience. And then events. So you can obviously get sponsors, and you can put on some pretty amazing events. And there's a Texas newspaper called the Texas Tribune that was started by ex-magazine people that used to be at Texas Monthly, and they made $500,000 hosting events in 2011 through ad sponsorships. So it's a really interesting way to tangibly connect with your audience, and brands want that engagement. I think more than anything else, that's kind of where they're coming from. Okay, so it's kind of shilly, right? So this is Jack Donaghy, my business hero, my business guru, and there was a famous episode of 30 Rock where he, as the vice president of East Coast Television and Microwave Oven Programming, which is so accurate, I think, about where we're all going to be. I mean, I might be the editor-in-chief of a magazine and also, the I don't know, the vice president of really cool cupcakes. Like you just can't see what your job title is going to be down the road with all these blurrings. So he talks about product integration, and he says it's setting a new standard in upward revenue stream dynamics for all of us, which should make you very nervous. Now, you will know you've struck gold when these three things come into play. And even though I'm probably sounding a little bit, tentative about this whole idea, it can work. And it will work when it fits your brand, it informs and or entertains your readers, and I guess what that means is that it provides some kind of service to your readers. And it connects your readers to the sponsors or the advertisers in meaningful and measurable ways. And the measurable part is interesting here because at the end of the day, in the past when you used to sell an ad, the idea was you would run the ad and you would guarantee that you would have X number of people come into their store and buy their product. And that was how an advertiser could feel, was it worth buying that ad. And any time an advertiser gives you money, it's usually cash out of their pocket. Like it's not goodwill, it's actual cash. And so they have to get results. Online, there was a sense of, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't, but it was so cheap that we could do it. Now the idea that it was all about scale, that you could just deliver this huge audience, that's not enough. You have to engage. There has to be a meaningful response. And it's interesting, too, because there was this idea, right, that we would have a gazillion page views, and that would result in all this money in terms of, online revenue, just like we would have, a huge audience of 1 million subscribers, and therefore we could charge $1 gazillion for ads. It's changed so dramatically right now that people are saying before scale was everything. Now you can win business on production values and engagement. And so what you're seeing right now is just a way of proving that you have production values, which means you have to put out really good copy, really good content, even if it's being bought and paid and signed off on by an advertiser, and there have to be results. So let's go to the eureka moment of our time. I'm sure some of you have heard of BuzzFeed. If you haven't, they're kind of the pioneers. They're the ones who struck gold first on this. And they are basically the LOL cats of the Internet. They do listicles. It's super shareable. It's just like a nice 3-minute diversion. But the people who run BuzzFeed have always said that they were about experience and about their readers, and that they, for example, didn't want to do slideshows because they thought of that as just traffic whoring. And so they do lists, and the whole list is there when you see it, and you can scroll through it easily. They also decided very early on in their iteration that they would not do banner ads. And so that put them way out there. But all of their revenue comes from social advertising. And so they are the kings of the sponsored content. So they talk about their particular business model as benefiting everyone and the world. And they say some companies only care about journalism, and as a result, the people focusing on lighter editorial fare advertising are second-class citizens. Some companies only care about traffic, which creates an environment where good journalists can't take the time to talk to sources or do substantive work. Some companies only care about ad revenue and actually force editors to create new sections or content just because brands want to sponsor them. And they say that they have avoided that problem because they love the silly, they love the substantive, and they love making advertising that is actually compelling. And when we are good at these three things, it benefits everyone. Now, if you look at it, you've got like a story about a corgi in a banana suit. I mean, this is not what I would call earth-shattering content. There's Heidi Klum's cleavage, which was a sponsored post. So they got paid for having a team of people sit down and work out a post of a list of Heidi Klum's cleavage. It's paying. And one BuzzFeed sponsored post will sell for $20,000 each. And they have a team of people. They have 19 ad salespeople who go around and sell advertisers and brands on these relationships. They're at the point now where you can only buy a sponsored post in groups. So they're doing multiple ad sales, which is what you want. And right now it's like 5 or 6 at a time, so it's $120K. It's working for them. It's working for them really well. Now, I talked earlier about how when they first started out, they were trying to sell social advertising to a market that only wanted to buy banners. So now many agencies and brands are refusing to buy banners. Companies that rely on traditional display units are suffering, and budgets are shifting rapidly to social advertising. So for example, back in 1988, it was $25 for 1,000 page views. In 2011, it was $11.50, and a successful blog today for banner advertising is charging $2.50. I mean, there's no money in all of this, and that's just the way it goes. So one of their board members at BuzzFeed, and they've been doing a really good job of getting more and more venture capital money, has said that social advertising will be the biggest media business since cable television. Now, my fear, of course, is that when we talk cable television, what they're really talking about is those infomercials for pajama jeans. That's how they're making their money. They're doing pajama jean commercials. Yes. Sure. Who is buying these $120,000 ads? Yeah, so the question was, and I think it's a really good one, who exactly is buying these $120,000 ads? They are the people that everybody wants right now. It's Mini Cooper. It's different, it's Budweiser. It's, oh gosh, here's one, Virgin Mobile. They had 330,000 page views for a sponsored post called 11 Things No One Wants to See You Instagram. It's big, right? Like, I mean, these are the big brands, and the truth of the matter is that all publishers want these big brands, and yet they're not going to buy the banner ads anymore, and they're probably not going to buy that full-page ad in a magazine because they feel like they can get better engagement with their audience through this kind of content marketing. Yeah. Sure. I had this question as well. Can you define social advertising for us? It's when anything is shared. So the idea is that it's just shareable. It's linkable. You can find it. It's something that you want to talk about with your friends. Again, it's that whole idea of engagement. And I know it's tricky. Like even a year ago, I didn't really understand what it meant, and I'm still kind of grasping at it. And I think part of it, very good, water cooler advertising, Julie, thank you. Yeah, that people are talking about. And then in terms of being able to track that, you're tracking it through how many times it was shared on Facebook, how many times it was tweeted about. Now, one of the things that kind of shocked me was I saw there was a campaign that was done that was considered to be a success, and they talked about how the fact that it was shared like 100 times on Facebook, and this is a big account that probably cost them $120,000. They were saying, oh, it got shared 120 times on Facebook. That was considered successful. So the scaling of the sharing is still pretty low, which means there's probably a way to enter into this, and there's probably a lot of, happy assuming going on as opposed to real, honest-to-God, sales. So when I say it's the Wild West, and everything that I'm talking about right now should have a bit of an asterisk to it that says, in the immortal quote of William, Goldman talking about the movies, nobody knows everything. We're just really hoping that this is going to be our golden goose. Okay, so share and share alike. There we go, right into it. So when you do a BuzzFeed post, you're going to have a consultative sales team that will be full of ideas for your clients. There'll be a creative services team making entertaining and shareable ads, a social discovery team expanding campaigns to Facebook, Twitter, and across the web, and an ad ops team that traffics our campaigns with skill, grace, and dogged determination. This is all the founder of BuzzFeed talking, and it's not surprising we are blowing all our revenue goals away. So in this particular sponsored post, which was for Mini Cooper, and it was about weird things that people have done with their clothes, you can see over in one corner there's the Facebook part. Then they have the Mini Cooper Twitter feed come in, and then they have other sponsored posts by Mini Cooper. So they have basically turned over their entire website to that sponsor on that page for $20,000. And if you're a reader, you really can't tell the difference, except that when you look at the Twitter feed, it's not a BuzzFeed Twitter feed. It's not the BuzzFeed Facebook page. It's the Mini Cooper versions. And part of what's happened here is these people who work for BuzzFeed are web native. They're digital native. They did not come from traditional media, so they don't have this church and state divide that the rest of us have. And so they can just look at it and say, it's a great listicle. It's the kind of thing we would do even if we weren't being paid to do it. But how great that somebody will pay us. Let's all get in bed together and make our audience happy. So here's an example of a sponsored post for Sony. So the one thing says 11 things you didn't know about PlayStation. The other one says, do you believe in the PlayStation 4? So which one is the ad and which one is the edit? And the truth is, it's the one on the left is the ad, and the way that you know it isn't because it says advertising. It just says below that they're a partner, and they're a BuzzFeed partner. That's their euphemism for, hey guys, somebody paid for this. And then on the, you can see that they've got the Twitter feed and they've got the Facebook. Whereas for the BuzzFeed one, there's actually a staff byline. And they've come under a lot of fire recently. Andrew Sullivan, who's a really great blogger, who's put his own website, The Daily Beast, or The Daily Dish, out there, and he's asking it to be a completely paid, ad-free model, has basically said that they have hired writers for two different purposes, writing journalism and writing ad copy. And before things got this desperate and opportunistic, the idea of a magazine hiring writers to craft their clients' ads rather than, do journalism would have been unimaginable. A magazine was not an ad agency. But the BuzzFeed model is to be both a journalism site and an ad agency. And you can see the reason for the excitement. They can now write purely for corporate clients, and that will pay for the journalist to do the rest. And so he's talking about how at The Atlantic there was a sponsored post by the CEO of Chevron, and that CEO with his paid post got the same byline in a magazine that used to publish Mark Twain and Thoreau. And I kept thinking to myself, I bet you Mark Twain would have been great at listicles. They would have killed it, right? But is that really what we want to do with our Mark Twains? And is that really how an audience wants to engage with that kind of talent? So these are all the questions to ask at the back of your head. So they also do sponsored links at BuzzFeed. And if you go down the list on the left-hand side, and it's the way that you know them when you see them on a home page is they're slightly colored. Yeah, it's all such sleight of hand, right? And so it's slightly colored, and it says, sponsored link, and then you go over, and it's a link to an actual magazine. So New York Magazine is paying BuzzFeed to pretend to be posting a link to their content that is basically out of the goodness of their hearts when it's actually being paid for. Now, this is kind of interesting for those of us who like to link and who like to, aggregate. So now the idea is that you won't aggregate for free. You won't give away the milk for free. Now, anytime you aggregate somebody, you're going to make them pay for it. And I'm not sure how we all feel about that. But it's coming, guys. It's coming. All right. Now, with all of this, this feels really creepy and it's church and state and I don't really like it. There is also a generational divide going on. And this was somebody who wrote in talking about the BuzzFeed issue about, were they fooling their readers? And this particular person said, for someone like me, and he's 27, there isn't much of a difference between ads and content. In both cases, some are worth consuming and some aren't. I'm just as likely to go to YouTube to seek out a commercial like I am as to search for a music video. And this person says, I don't see BuzzFeed as a site that operates within the confines of traditional journalism, and I don't think they've ever tried to position themselves that way. Most of the content is silly scroll-down photo essays, which are a great way to waste 3 minutes. I don't expect those posts to follow the traditional rules of journalism because they're not traditional journalism. And so, it's true. When you look at, this is a BuzzFeed site. It's called Cute Feed, and it's basically, really, really funny things that you can do with hedgehogs. And the little 15 life lessons from the It's Always Sunny gang, which is a sponsored post by a TV show, it fits in there. It doesn't look like it's not a sore thumb. It's fine. However, let's go to the next slide. This is politics. So what BuzzFeed has tried to do is they want to be silly and substantive. So they went out and hired a really high-profile guy named Ben Smith to set up their political blog. And that same post shows up there, and it really looks wrong. And so this same reader that was talking about how the other blurring didn't bother them, he says that Ben Smith, BuzzFeed Politics exists as a separate piece of BuzzFeed and should have stricter rules for sponsored content. Because while the format is slightly different, that part of the site is clearly committed to real traditional journalism. So what I find fascinating about all this for our purposes is when you say you have to know what fits with your brand. If you're BuzzFeed, if you're a design blog, if you're a food blog, in some cases you can get away with certain things that you couldn't get away with if you're a news organization. And I think as we watch the New York Times and we watch the Globe and Mail and we watch the Calgary Herald and we watch different media organizations that should have their brand equity be around credibility, they are having a hard time playing this game. They're having a hard time, selling their content. And, I mean, in some ways they might be having an easy time selling it. They're just having a hard time with the repercussions with their audience. And there are certain advertisers that you probably don't want to sell your content to. And in this case, The Atlantic. So The Atlantic's a really fascinating example, and it's one of the oldest magazines in the world. Very, very thoughtful, small, engaged, really intelligent audience. That's their brand. And they went really heavily digital a few years ago and have been extremely successful. Their website's really vibrant. It's just a really, really great website. And they made the decision as well that they would start to sell some ad content. And it's called Native Solutions, this idea of native advertising, which just means that it's digital. And their goal was to help brands create and distribute engaging content by making the ads linkable, shareable, and discoverable. So they had a thing called Where Design Meets Technology. They did it with Porsche. It was shared 139 times on Facebook and 80 times on Twitter. This is the one that was considered a success. Native Solutions programs have been so successful, they now account for half of their digital ad revenue, which is up 50% in 2012. And there's a 15-person creative team. Now, they got into some trouble in that recently, at the same time, there was a big book coming out about Scientology that was written by Lawrence Wright, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner. And I can just say that it's not necessarily a glowing review of the religion or the quasi-religion. Somebody in the Church of Scientology, which has lots of money and no shame, went to the Atlantic's advertising department and the Native Solutions department and said, we will give you all the money you want if you will let us produce this article that basically talks about all the great successes the Church of Scientology has had, building churches all over the world. And they said, okay. And so this post came out, and it was glowing, and it was wonderful, and it just has that little yellowed bar that says it's sponsored content, but it was right on the Atlantic's website. I mean, unless you kind of went, oh my God, the Atlantic is promoting the Church of Scientology, you'd have no way really of understanding. It just felt really wrong with their brand. And they also had comments. And they allowed the Church of Scientology to edit and moderate the comments. So as you can imagine, they were extremely positive about the church's progress. And it was just such an epic fail in terms of all of those three criteria for what makes a successful sponsored post or sponsored content that it just blew up on them. And you know it's blown up on you when The Onion weighs in. And so The Onion came out immediately with their own sponsored post touting the Taliban. And the Taliban is a vibrant and thriving political movement. When any sort of group maintains the level of diligence and perseverance the Taliban has in the past decade, it is only too certain they will flourish. Within the next year, I suspect the world will come to regard the Taliban as among the world's foremost political movements. It's only inevitable. They've also proven their worth as a more than willing business partner. So the Atlantic went, ugh, and they came out really quickly and said, we screwed up. And they pulled it, and they sat down, and they basically came up with some pretty good guidelines as to how to manage the opportunity versus the financial opportunity versus the opportunity losses in terms of your brand legitimacy with your audience. So, back to our Deadwood theme, when I look at all of this, what I realize is that it's like that old Bob Dylan quote, to live outside the law, you must be honest. So you better pick your sheriff wisely. In traditional, media companies, when it came time to which ads would you run and which ads wouldn't you, it was usually the publisher's decision, and they would consult with an editor, and there was dialogue back and forth. When money's tight, as we all know, you start to make different decisions than you might when you have the opportunity to say no. But there's short-term gain, and then there's long-term viability, and I think that we all have to be really careful. So, for example, if you have a publication that's heavily engaged with your advertising community, and it's something where really they are your partners, and you probably can say yes to a lot of things that other people wouldn't, and at the same time, if you're a publication that isn't going to be around a long time, you just want to make your money and run, you can say yes to a lot of things that other people can't. I often think of it as, the daddy. There has to be somebody somewhere who can look and say yes but no, or yes and hell yes. So in the case of this kind of opportunity, you just have to have a daddy. You have to have a good sheriff. And there's Al Schwerigan, who is say hell yes to anything, and then there's Timothy Oliphant's character, who's just a little bit more of a realist about what can happen. I'm going to take a breath now. Okay, so affiliate links is a really interesting sponsored opportunity that's out there right now. There's a website called Brain Pickings, and it's a woman named Maria Popova, and she has 1.2 million viewers every day. I mean, it's a big audience, and Maria just has incredibly eclectic taste, and she goes out and she finds the most interesting ideas, objects, books, music, whatever. So she's basically a curator of ideas, and she makes some of her money right now by doing affiliate links. So she will do a post about the best books on design. If you click on that book, you go back to Amazon, and Amazon will give her, I think it's 7% of the cost of the book when you buy. And I know a lot of blogs are doing this. It's an interesting opportunity, and the way that Maria justifies this is she says, I don't talk about things that I don't love. So if you have one of those blogs that's just very very tied toward what you love, you can probably do this and probably do this quite well. I'm not sure where the line is between that and an ad, where and this is where for I think the blogging community, it's a big question right now. And it's the same thing with edits. So for example, when I worked at different magazines, stuff would come in the mail. People would send us stuff. And, could we take it home? At some companies you could, at some companies you couldn't. You'll be surprised to know that at some of the biggest American fashion and beauty magazines, or maybe you won't be surprised, they take a lot of stuff home. And, so when we talk about are we dirty, are we not dirty, well, if you look at any, like Vogue, any major fashion magazine, there is a quid pro quo going on there like nobody's business. And, when at the different big fashion magazines in New York, the joke was you weren't allowed to take it at the office, but at Christmas time, all the advertisers would send huge packages to your house. And the doorman, it would be just like all of a sudden shoes and perfume and coats and bags would just keep coming and coming and coming. And it was a wink, wink, nudge, nudge that somehow you were still pure, that you hadn't in any way been compromised by all this free stuff. And so, when a book publisher sends you a book to review and you say nice things about it, should you get paid as well on the website for doing that? Maybe. I mean, it's still, you have to kind of figure it out in your own head. The news organizations that I've worked for have always had strict policies around whether or not we could take free travel, for example. But then as budgets became less and less, same thing with restaurant views, as there was no money for expenses, there was a lot of wink, wink, nudge, nudging going on. And that's now become more and more overt where, a lot of us are allowed to take paid travel. And it's no longer this big deal. And you're supposed to then put at the very bottom of the story, this was sponsored by Travel Alberta. This was sponsored by Tourism Australia. We want to thank blank. I mean, we're already doing it. So I don't know if this is such a bad thing or not. One of the things that people are saying with Maria and Brain Pickings is she has a tip jar as well. So she's trying to do the best of both worlds. She's wanting you to give her money directly for being such a great curator. She's getting money from the affiliate links. And then she also, when she sends out a tweet, there's an online site called Fab, and they're like a really cool, kind of almost like an Etsy hip stuff discounter. And like the guilt group would be for high-end stuff. And if she sends out a tweet saying, catch this great rug, and you click on that tweet and you buy that rug, she gets money. So it's out there, right? I mean, you're basically selling your expertise and your tacit approval. Now, this is Nick Denton, and Nick is fascinating. He's the founder of Gawker, and he has been ahead of the curve on pretty much every new way of looking at audience engagement since he launched Gawker. And Gawker is successful. It's always made money. It was a blog to begin with. I mean, he doesn't have his fans. He's considered one of the bastards out there, and then he makes money off the back of hardworking editors who he burns, he hires, he burns them out, and then he moves on to the next one. But he's also really big in audience engagement. And his new thing is commerce content. And he says it's a brand new thing that merges writing and product curation. It adds value to our readers' lives. It includes everything from posts about the cheapest deal on something our readers already want to introducing them to valuable new products they've never seen. It's a new type of service journalism, and yes, we generate revenue when products sell. Okay, so this is an actual job description for somebody to come and do this role on Jezebel, which is their feminist. It's like it used to be a feminist, snarky female pop culture site, and it's still called Celebrity Sex Fashion Without Airbrushing, but I wonder if they're going to have to change that logo once they move into this world more. So they want you to write deal roundups, craft product curation. They want you to engage in conversation with your readers. They want you to research clothes, beauty, accessories, household items that are worthy of recommendation. They want you to become a product review and style forum hound. They want you to source original exclusives from retailers. They want you to promote their content on social media, and they want you to track your success in analytics and affiliate programs. So basically, you're in business to sell people stuff. Now, this talk chicken and egg, I mean, we're already there. We've been there forever. Anybody who's ever run any kind of service content is already living in this world. And, you know, Lucky Magazine, which was considered really groundbreaking as a shopping magazine, has always done reader giveaways. You know, Vitamin Daily, close to home, does their daily deals. It is absolutely no different. So when I also say it's the Wild West out there, just keep in mind that a lot of people are coming up with these really fancy, you know, microwave oven technology type descriptors for things that we have always done. I think the key for you guys right now is to look at your publications, to look at your websites, to look at your own skill set and figure out, you know, how can you put yourself into an opportunity where everything is open. It's like a brand new world, and then how can you put out great, engaging content that you can also get paid for that allows you to sleep at night? And I think that's the big challenge we're all going to go through right now. Another big breath. Okay, so that's part of it. Like, it's a gold rush, right? But you're not alone. So if you're a magazine, you're not alone in this. If you're a website, you're not alone in this, because guess what? The newspapers are in here. You know, Groupon was in here. Facebook's in here. Twitter's in here. Cable television is in here. You know, when you look at Top Chef and you see, I mean, hey, anybody not know that it's GE that is sponsoring Top Chef? Everybody not know that, you know, Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer, drives a Toyota? Because every second shot is a product placement shot. And, you know, that episode of 30 Rock that I was referring back to earlier, it was, you know, known as the Snapple episode, where in the middle of the episode they all start raving about Snapple at the same time that they're telling Jack that they don't want to, you know, shill for advertisers. And it was just so perfectly indicative of how we're in this. We are so in this, and it is crowded out there. So here's some people that have basically decided that they can sleep well no matter what, and that's the Huffington Post. So they have a whole a whole stream of content called sponsored content, and it's called sponsored content. And you can go out there and you can buy yourself, instead of having celebrity bloggers in the traditional HuffPost, way of doing it, go out there and just have themselves be heard and not get paid. Now they're getting people to pay them to publish their stuff, and it's done well. I mean, it looks good. There's nothing wrong with it. They've said it's sponsored content. You might actually really like this story called Suit Yourself, and you might also really want to know what the CEO of Chevron has to say. And so for whatever reason, they wouldn't be doing this, and they wouldn't have it in one place unless they'd figured out that this is the best way to do it. Okay, so this is really, really interesting, and I'm worried that you guys can't see the slide. So this comes from a website called A Practical Wedding, and I was at I think it's sort of the premier blogger conference. It's for lifestyle bloggers. It's called Alt Summit. I went in January, and it was a real eye-opener for me to see that they have come so incredibly far in terms of the blogging community that, when I say we're all in it together and we're all in the soup, they're kind of at the lead in terms of audience engagement. And so Meg, her name is Meg Keene, and Meg started A Practical Wedding as a website in 2008 as a feminist wedding planning site, which sounds strange, but it's like Sassy Magazine for weddings. And it's got everything you want in terms of great content. It's got great attitude. It really knows its audience. It really thought long and hard about how to get it paid for, how to make sure that they were really working closely with advertisers and service providers to really allow people not just to read but to act. And so they have this service thing down cold. And so they have a whole host of digital first opportunities. And that phrase digital first is becoming really tired. But when I think of digital first, what they mean is, no, we're in it. We're not going to think about what we should do or what used to be done. We're just going to think about our audience and what they need and how to best deliver it to them. So there's a premier kind of advertising model that you can take from them. And you get an ad on the front page. You get the ability to buy a sponsored post. You get a membership to their vendor forum, and you get a free listing in their vendor directory. So the rates are $750 for an introductory package that's discounted, in which you get a sponsored post, 3 months of advertising, and a directory listing. And then after that, it's $100 a month. If you want to go a little bit lower, you can get a listing in the vendor directory, and it's $425 to $500 for a 1-year listing. Now, you have to apply to become part of this, which I think is really interesting. And one of the things that Meg does is she's completely upfront with her audience, and her audience expects it. And I don't think it's just the blogs in which that sense of, authentic, I'm gonna tell you what's really going on here is really expected. And I think this may ultimately be the fly in BuzzFeed's ointment, in that they're kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudging their sponsored posts right now. And I don't think audiences are stupid. And I think if you just tell them what you're doing, it'll go a long way. And so in Meg's case, this is a sponsored post. The person has bought that premier thing, and they get to write their own art. Meg will go and interview them and write an article about them. And it appears just like every other article on her post, except it's got this big, huge asterisk. And in it she says, hey, this is a sponsored post. I really like these guys. That's why I'm writing about them. I wouldn't write about them if I didn't really like them. I think they really fit in our brand. I really think that they will serve you. But I want you to know that they paid me for this. And I kind of like it. I think that's the way to go. And then this is a sponsor shout-out where at the very end she just says, you know what, this post was written by one of our sponsors. And we just want you to know that. And yeah, they probably paid me some money for that. And I just want you to know. But I wouldn't let them hear if I didn't like them. And that little bar across the side on the whatever your left or my right or your left is all of the directory listings. So it's banner advertising, but in this particular case it works. And everybody there is paid. You click on it and you go directly to their website. And in this particular kind of entity, it really works. Like each of these people they're all about image. They're all about weddings. It's a perfect kind of opportunity for these particular people to reach the community. And one of the things that Meg said that I thought was fascinating was she said, our advertisers are not competing with each other. We have a community. And so if one photographer gets a gig and the other one doesn't, it doesn't hurt because everybody wins if somebody gets that wedding gig. And so when she's selling this to sponsors, she's saying, look at the community, both from the readership point of view, but also from the advertising point of view that I have aggregated for you. And here's some more of her directories. They're beautiful, and they really work. And one of the things that she said that I think is really interesting is that the directory is built around a sanity pledge. She calls it a sanity pledge. All vendors have to pledge that they will shoot any kind of wedding, that they don't have hidden fees, and that they will support your wedding however it looks, big, small, funky, traditional. She says we screen all applicants to make sure they fit with our ethos, and then you can shop for your wedding to your heart's delight. If it sounds like we're trying to change the wedding industry a little bit at a time, we totally are. It's really kind of, I mean, this is a totally, they've sold, but they've sold in such a clever, thoughtful, upfront way. And, I wish that this kind of approach to all of this could be taken up by everybody. In some cases, BuzzFeed does have this approach, which is they're saying we're silly, we're going to do silly things for, really cool advertisers. We'd probably run these posts if they paid for them or not. It also works. They could just be a little bit more upfront about what they're doing. And, that question earlier, which I thought was a really good question of, who are the brands that are spending $120,000? Not everybody. And then the second part of this is, and how do I get my version of that brand? How do I get my person? Because I'm not going to get the Mercedes-Benzes. I'm not going to get the Mini Coopers. I'm not going to get the Porsches. And the truth is you're not. So you're going to have to figure out other ways to get the small, like these are small little mom and pop or mom and mom or not mom wedding, suppliers, and they can still do it. Okay, so the cow left the barn a long time ago. This is a Family Guy. God, Seth MacFarlane was terrible, but that's aside. I made this before I saw how bad he was on the Oscars. We have lost our virginity in terms of all of this forever ago, so let's just face it. When I was at Swerve, I really liked our advertisers. I felt that Swerve was there to be part of a conversation about a better, more interesting, more vibrant Calgary, and I really wanted to support as many people as I could who were, putting their money where their mouths were and were starting businesses, because Calgary's a really entrepreneurial city, and I wanted to figure out a way to, spotlight local businesses and spotlight local endeavors, and I didn't feel bad about the idea that sometimes people would want to pay for that. I thought that was kind of cool. But what I did want to do was come up with a format that, clearly said it was an advertising spotlight, that, solved it for the advertiser. Because, yes, Mini Cooper has a whole bunch of people that know their brand, that care about their brand, but most people don't. And so I thought if I could take whatever expertise I have in terms of how to connect with a reader and give them all the information and have it look good in the environment that was Swerve so that the ads and the edits work together, how could I do that? So I came up with a template, and it's not, it's certainly nothing earth-shattering. It's pretty straightforward. But the idea was they would get a half-page banner, a half-page ad, and then they would have a photo that we would take, and then an article that we would write. And the article could be, just straight text, or it could be Q&A. And I didn't, work with the staff. I always hired freelancers to do it because I was trying to, at least keep my side of the line pretty clear. It gave the photographer and the writer got paid more, and this was really important to me, was that I kept thinking, you might get paid X, $1 to write one story, but if you're going to do advertorial, it should be $2. And that was just basically valuing things. And, they paid that, so they paid the premium for it. It was still less than the cost of a full-page ad in the magazine. And so it was really good value for the advertisers. And so I was really guiding the advertorial. So I was the sheriff. here's where we got into some trouble. So every year we wanted to do an editorial gift guide at Christmas because, I love stuff. I love shopping, and I love the idea that there might be somebody that's a Swerve shopper who goes out there and finds the really best Christmas stuff. So Rita Sirignano was our shopper, and she had a very clear idea of what we were looking for. I mean, we weren't looking for the most expensive, pretentious gifts. We were looking for really cool stuff that we would be excited to see under the tree. And so this was one of our editorial gift guides, and what we did was we spotlit local shopkeepers, and then we also had sort of, their gifts. It was called Santa's Little Helpers. And this is the second spread, and this is great. So that board game, the Beatles board game, came from Chinook Center, and it says Chinook Center, and then, Chinook Center bought an ad. And there's I love the fact everybody that was featured in our shopping guide should have bought an ad because it's a perfect fit for our brand. We love their business. We love their stuff. We wanted them in the magazine. Chinook Center bought an ad. I thought it was a really nice mix. Then we got into this interesting situation where Stealing Home, which for anybody who's not from Calgary is a fantastic store. Again, local, great stuff, great taste. If I get anything from Stealing Home, I'm always thrilled. And they are always part of our gift guide. So they bought an ad, and the ad came in, and I hadn't seen it. And it did not say advertisement or staff picks when it came in the door. It was just a whole bunch of items set up exactly like our gift guide with a box around it. And I remember the ad rep was so happy. And I had to have one of those difficult conversations saying, you can't do this. You just can't do this. I mean, God bless them for figuring out that, wow, it looks just like their editorial, and it's perfect. I mean, in some ways, they were kind of inventing their own version of sponsored content, but they can't do that. And so we put the advertisement and staff picks on top of it, and thought, we better think twice about this. So the solution was not to pull the advertising or pull this kind of content. The solution was to come up with an advertising gift guide. And it basically was the same idea. It did not run in the same issue as our gift guide, and it was very clearly marked as an advertising gift guide, although I think there was a lot of blurring of the lines. We put everything into it that we would put into an editorial spread. I wanted it to look good, and I wanted these advertisers to succeed. I offered to send a stylist or a shopper to each of these advertisers' store to pick out the item that we thought would be the most Swerve-like. Not everybody took us up on it, which was, their prerogative. We also, you always try to figure out how to maximize your profits. So we tried to combine the advertorial with the gift guide, and so now you've got the thing where they were offered the picture, the text, and their ability to do their own, sort of roundup of gifts, just like the Stealing Home ad. What happened there was the whole thing got out of control in that, they didn't want one picture, they wanted 5 pictures, and they didn't want, 250 words, they wanted 1,250 words. And instead of having 4 items, they were going to cheat and have like one of the groupings be 10 items. And it was just completely out of control. And this is happening as well with sponsored content where, again, if you have really, really smart marketers, they can kind of get implicitly that that they may not know how to, that they've come to you as the editorial experts and who really understand their readers and really know how to engage with readers in a way that doesn't feel icky, and without that me, patina on it. And they will defer to you. Most people don't. They just don't. And it's not because they're bad people. It's just because it's a very sophisticated thing, and it's not something that anybody thinks about. And sometimes you just want to be the car salesman and sell the car. So even at BuzzFeed, what they're saying is that, a brand will sometimes have an idea and they'll say, this is what we want to do. And our creative team will say, I get what you're trying to do, but I think that will backfire. Or they might say, it's not speaking in an authentic voice, or it's not speaking the language of the internet, or it's, not the right way to do it for BuzzFeed's audience. And so it's a pretty labor-intensive thing. And this particular advertorial gift guide took us twice as long to produce as the editorial gift guide. And, anybody, it's just, there's back and forth, and you've got a lot of people who want to have input, and they're paying for it, so it's hard not to let them have input. And so you often find yourselves in situations where It's really tough, and I think that for a lot of people that see sponsored content as being, the golden goose, they're going to be in for a big surprise because it's really, really a time suck. It can be contentious, and you can wind up in a situation where it's really quite cost intensive. So the people that are producing native advertising, it's like producing a whole shoot or a whole feature. It's not cheap, and I think for a lot of people, they think, oh, I'll just do this and I'll just whip them off. Well, it doesn't work that way. The bloggers are finding, for example, that the be-all and end-all is to get a big, brand like an Anthropology to work with you. So you might spend 6 months reaching out to Anthropology to have them come and give you, ad sponsorship or, an ad or some kind of, whether they do sponsored posts with you or an event or whatever. And so you're spending 6 months making relationships. And say you finally get it. Well, then all of a sudden now you're dealing with a big brand, and they have expectations, and they're going to want, you at their beck and call, and they're going to want to have input, and they can't understand that you can't get it done because you're doing 25 other blog posts and you've got a kid to pick up from school. And it might only give you $250, and wouldn't you be better off just scaling back and saying, you know what, I'd be so much better off just getting people from my local community to give me a directory listing. I just see an ad. Why have the advertiser pay less when they are getting a full half page anyway, and it costs the publisher more money for freelance photo and writing? Where's the real benefit to the magazine? It's funny because as I was saying that, I was trying to think, oh, do I have to tell the real truth? The truth is nobody sells their full page ads at the full page price. So if that full page had been $5,000, we were probably discounting it to $25 anyway. This way I got 3. So I was kind of there. See, I was lying. You caught me. Yeah, so it's basically a way to kind of tart up the full page ad and get some money without actually saying that you're still really discounting it. So Sandra, that's a great question. I think for a really good magazine, it's probably easier for them. Like the Globe and Mail, for example, makes a fortune off their custom content, a fortune, way more than they would for a full page ad. And that's because the advertiser is paying for their legitimacy, and that game will end soon. And Julie pointed out it's better value for the reader. So that's again, it's like, I wasn't doing these gift guides, and I wasn't doing the advertorial, and I don't think BuzzFeed and people that are doing really good custom content are doing it, or branded content or sponsored content, are doing it because they think it's worse. They're doing it because they think it's better. And when I was at ESPN, I worked at ESPN for 10 years, and part of my job after I had my kids, I was freelancing and I needed some money, and so they hired me to become, the custom content girl. And this was back in, I guess, like 2000, and, well, not 2000, I guess 2003, 2004. And what it meant was I was going with the head of marketing to meet big clients. And so I remember doing a campaign for Schick with their Gillette razor that was all around the X Games. And it was so much fun. I mean, I did really fun things for car companies, and they gave me more money. I had more staff. The only downside I had was I had to work with the marketing people at the advertiser, but they, if I gave them a great idea, they accepted it. They just wanted really, really high quality content. It was great. I had the best time, and I didn't feel dirty at all. I think had I had to write about if the assignment, if the kind of content I was doing had been any different, I probably wouldn't have liked it. Okay, all right. So this is going to embarrass Kate Kusi, who's on our panel, or the webinar. She's on the other end of the line. Kate was the marketing. She has a website now called Yuppie Love, which is terrific. She was the marketing person at a company called Art Central and Fashion Central, which, again, great Calgary local business, perfect match for Swerve. What they were doing in terms of opening up a great, historical space to creative people in the arts and in the fashion business was, remarkable. I really wanted to partner with them. And I didn't just want to take an ad because I thought that they needed to explain their story to our audience in a way that an ad couldn't do it. So it was like a win-win-win-win-win. And so we came up with different versions of Advertorial for them. This happened to be a Mother's Day gift guide. And it was just so perfect. The idea was you had your branding ad, but you also got to show the diversity of things that your different clients had. So we did spotlights on the different artists and the different galleries, the different designers. I would have done it editorially if I could, but I couldn't focus on one advertiser or one entity week in, week out. And I really felt like they needed to build that brand recognition. And so it turned out to be such a great opportunity. And, I have to confess, I worked on these, and I'm not supposed to. I'm the editor. I wasn't supposed to do this, but I did because I really loved the project. And so that internal, slippery slope, I crossed it big time. I was a fan. And, I did pieces for the Banff Center. I was a fan. I did pieces for Travel Alberta. I was a fan. I'm guilty. I shouldn't have, but I did. Now, with the Travel Alberta and the Banff Center proposals, these were magazines that we produced for them. What was fascinating there was they wanted our editorial expertise. So I came to them with a couple of unbelievable opportunities. One involved a George Weber photo shoot. George is an amazing photographer. And the reason I brought it to them was because they were going to publish on glossy paper, and I thought it would look so beautiful, and George should get paid, and it'll be great. It was too out there. It was too swerve for the advertiser. At the end of the day, what they wanted from their sponsored content or their advertorial was something that was really, just a little bit to the left of what they were already doing in a, traditional marketing sense. So instead, I made that the cover story of the issue that their insert went into. Same thing happened with the Banff Center, where we had this great idea editorially, and they just wouldn't go for it. They wanted something a little bit more just traditionally PR-y. And so the client's always right. You say yes, and then we used it for a later cover issue. So sometimes, the win-win can happen afterwards, that you work with a client, the idea doesn't hit, and yet you're able to take that idea and use it for yourself editorially. And that's when you're bringing your A game to the table. And the same thing happened to me at ESPN. There'd be ideas that I'd pitched to a client at ESPN that I ended up using editorially in the magazine. So, don't turn off the good part of your brain just because you're working with an advertiser. Let's bring it. If they don't want it, then you use it elsewhere. If they do want it, well, then you got great paper finally. Oh, and now I'm going to embarrass Julie. So this may have been at Swerve the best of all possible partnerships. Calgary Co-op is a grocery store. They needed to differentiate themselves from Safeway and Sobeys. And one of the things that Calgary Co-op has always done, because it's a grassroots grocery store, is they are the people that if you're a local producer and you need your products out there, they will put it on the shelf. And that's huge. And they also, because of their kind of co-op-y roots, they were really accessible. And so, we could do events with them. We could do giveaways with them. They were a Calgary-based company, and I really wanted to celebrate that. It wasn't having to go to California for approval. It was, I could just go down the street and talk to them. So when I talk about, people trading off other people's legitimacy, I think that's really important. And I think that, whether you're hiring a name or you are a name, your name is everything. And so if you're going to put your name on something that is an advertisement or a sponsored post or whatever, it's valuable, and you should value it. So I approached Julie Van Rosendahl and said, would you like to work on these things? Basically, they want a story to spotlight these things, and they want a recipe. And I can give you steady work for, a long time. I can pay you, and I paid Julie extremely well, but it was worth every penny because she just took care of it. Like I didn't even, at the end, I just had to be there as kind of a, just a friendly voice between her and Co-op, but it really, really worked well. We designed a template that would work for growers, that would work for a wellness challenge initiative that they had. It was the same template, but we could rejuvenate it. It was just a really, really great partnership. We did a thing with wine and cheese. We ended up giving away the cheese box. They sold a gazillion cheese boxes because of this Swerve promo. And it was the kind of thing I would have written about anyway if I could, but again, I couldn't cover Co-op every week. This gave me the opportunity to do that. Of course, then Safeway and Sobeys came back and said, what will you do for us? What can you do for us? And you're just like, man, I got no more ideas. I don't know. So we even at the end, we partnered them up with a local figure skater who was on the Canadian national figure skating team, and he was doing a series of exhibitions and trying to get himself off to Vancouver for the Olympics, named Vaughn Chaper. We did a photo shoot with Vaughn where we had him styled. I mean, the hunkiest shots you've ever seen. We did a pull-out poster in the magazine. We did a signing with Vaughn. He ended up getting some money so that he could, through Swerve Audience, the Swerve Audience came through and helped him go to Vancouver. And at the same time, we were selling cheese. And I could see no problem with any of that. It wasn't crappy cheese. It was good cheese. And it was a Canadian company. And, you know, who hates cheese? So in the end of the day, it was really successful. Now, what's interesting, and it'd be interesting to have Julie weigh in on this, right now, I left Swerve a couple of years ago, and now on the Swerve website, when we originally launched the website, we put Julie's co-op recipes up. They were under a thing that said exclusive recipes. That was the headline or the header. And then at the very bottom of every story, we always put sponsored by Calgary Co-op. Now it says Julie for co-op, and I probably would have been uncomfortable with that. So, because that to me now it's crossed the divide, and it doesn't say advertising or anything. It's just in there as if that's a given, and I just feel like that's a little uncomfortable. At the same time, you know, I listen to the radio and I hear Angela Colcott and Dave Rutherford. Dave, who's a sort of right-leaning libertarian, man of the people, is flogging shoes for Checkmate Shoes, and Angela's flogging windows, and it makes me uncomfortable. So, I still have my own internal lines, and I just don't know. It's one of those things where now that we've moved from print, where it's pretty clear, to digital, I think we have to have another sense of, where's the law? Where's the ultimate greater good? Oh, Julie goes, I hadn't noticed that. See, that's part of the problem, too, is for God's sake, people, as you're selling your talent, please let them know, because they might have something to say about that. How can a writer get involved in driving this? Take the lead. Excellent question, Margaret. I think, ideally, do you have a relationship with a magazine? Are you a staff person? Or are you a freelancer? Just waiting for them to type in here. A freelancer. Okay, excellent. So I would find some publications that you feel really akin with, and whose sponsors and advertisers are people that you like. And then I think you should sit down with the editor and just say, I have an opportunity for you. And, really figure out, what the value would be, how you can really make it go. I mean, in some ways, you are your own publisher, and you're basically, it's always they're just linking to you. I mean, it's so funny, right, how the whole digital logic can be applied back. When we hire a freelancer, we're basically just, we're linking to you. All right, so this was another instance that was really interesting for me, and I'm just telling you guys cautionary tales now. So when we launched the Swerve website, and we waited forever to launch a website, we had a contest, and the contest was a terrific one. It was with Fiat, and they had just launched the Fiat Cinquecento, the Fiat 500, cute car, perfect for Swerve, and we were going to give away a car. So the car dealer generously gave us the car, and they in return were going to get a full page of advertisement. And so that was fine, and that was great. But I didn't want it to end there. I thought this is a real opportunity for us to really engage with our readers and for them to really, promote their brand in a swervy way. So I went online and I was looking around, and I saw an amazing number of Cinquecento videos that had been produced from, starting when the car was first introduced in Italy in the 60s. I mean, they were hysterical. There was a Top Gear show in which that was up on YouTube that showed the Cinquecento being reviewed. It was really funny. It was really entertaining. It was that great moment where the advertising is content. And so every day for the contest, I would put up another YouTube video just promoting the Cinquecento and all its cute wonderfulness. And, there was Luigi from Cars, who's a Cinquecento, and I thought, this is so cool. And we started doing little stories, like little Swerve promos in the magazine, using, Luigi as a way of getting, the Swerve readers to think that they could enter and they could win. And then I get the call, and the call is from the ad rep. And the ad rep says the client hates it. They don't want you making fun of their car. It's very serious. This is way out of whack for them. And I said, but this is like see it advertising, and this is free advertising, and readers are loving it. Like, we had so much engagement with people. What are they going to do next? What crazy ad? And it was great fun. And the advertiser hated it, and I had to stop. And, you just kind of say, okay, you win some, you lose some. Now, the Magalog. This is the part where, I worry. I worry just a little. At the same time, I'm kind of excited. So, there's Mercedes-Benz magazine produced by the En route to the Spa Facts people. It's out there. They've got lots of money. It's really glossy, blah, blah, blah. Then you've got Porter Airlines, which is it's a funky WestJet that runs between Toronto and New York. And they hired the marketing creative agency called Wink that was started by Tyler Brûlé, who was the founder of Wallpaper and now Monocle, to produce their, in-flight magazine. It's called Reporter. It's really good, you guys. Like, it's a great magazine. Years ago, like a gazillion years ago, Club Monaco had a magazine, which none of you know, but I actually worked for Club Monaco magazine, and they sent me to England, and I got to interview my favorite graphic designer. I did, amazing. Some of my best writing I did for Club Monaco magazine. It is the way of the future, and what's happening more and more is there might be a time when Samsung will be, the publisher that that it's going to end up, if this thing goes full course, that we all end up working for a certain company. I mean, this is a situation where this is, on the left, it's Jenna's picks, and this is Jenna Lyons, who is the creative director of J. Crew. This is on her website. This is in their catalog, their Magalog, her picks. On the other side, there was a blog called J. Crew Aficionada, started by a bunch of people, and they just basically do incredible service all about J. Crew. Which one's the ad? Well, it's the one on the left that looks just like its edit, and the one on the right, which is the real edit, looks like it's like a promotional blog. It's just, everything is so friggin' blurred. So I've come to the conclusion that at the end of the day, we're all going to work for Anthropology, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And a million years ago, when I was in New York, I actually approached Anthropology about creating a magazine for them, because I thought, man, your brand is so perfect. You've really figured out this audience. You should have a magazine. And they're doing events, and they're hiring bloggers, and it seems to be the be-all and end-all. So, maybe we'll all work for Anthropology or Roots or, The Bay or Holtz, except all these people are now flinging, mainstream magazine publishing, and they are working literally for Holt Renfrew magazine or George magazine, or, it's not George, what's the name? Harry. I mean, it's crazy. There was, however, a moment where it was all perfect, and it was like alchemy. So the gold rush, you'd finally, you'd made your own gold. And this is an ad that's considered probably one of the greatest ads of all time, and it's an ad for Rolls-Royce, and it's from 1958. And David Ogilvy, who considered the father of modern advertising, and the personification of madman, wrote this. And the headline says, at 60 miles an hour, the only noise in this new Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock. And then he does this whole article essentially explaining why the Rolls-Royce is so wonderful. It's great. You can't get that across in an ad. You have to go to editorial. Just like there's some things, some great, punchy, fun things that you can only explain in ads. And I think that we have to figure out at the end of the day how to make it alchemic and bring the two together and be truly added or added content. So that's kind of my talk, guys. I'm going to take a sip of tea.
While Shelley takes a sip of tea, I'm going to go back to a question from earlier. How do you come up with the amount to charge a client for social advertising?
Okay, the truth is whatever they'll pay. And it sounds really, really unhelpful, and I don't mean it to. But one of the things that came out it's definitely dimes to dollars. You're not going to get the money that you used to for an ad. So, in the same way that everything is scalable. So, a big magazine might charge $100,000 for a full page ad. You might charge $1,000. You might end up charging $100. What the bloggers are now doing that are in this world is they're charging $2.50 for 1,000 CPM, but they're trying to move away from CPM as well, and just make it flat. So they're basically, you might look at I don't know, $250. But the problem then is, all your costs. So you ideally want to have a rate and then all of the production costs associated. We're still really making this up. I think that people are going to pay more now than they will later once they realize that it's not the golden goose. So, get in now and get the money. And one of the things that they kept saying at the Alt Summit that I thought was really helpful was you're going to make mistakes. You're going to ask for too much and they're going to say no. And that's okay. It's okay to make a mistake because the next time you go back, if it's not $100, it'll be $75. And if it turns out that it's $50, well then, you build a relationship and you can come back to them and make it $100. We really are feeling our way around, but it's definitely not going to be anywhere near enough to justify selling your soul. Yeah.
I have another question from earlier, but I'm also going to get to the 3 that have just been presented. So the question from earlier was, so how important is it to say with the co-op thing that it is an advertisement, and why or why not?
I think it goes back to that relationship with your readers and, honesty. Because we have relationships with our readers. We like our readers. We trust them. We respect them. And at the same time, we also respect our advertiser. And so I think it's absolutely vital that you call a spade, that you call an ad. And if you're not, then you're lying to yourself. You have to ask yourself the reason, why am I not calling it an ad? Well, if somebody pays you to do something, it's paid for, and you should say that. So I just can't see a long-term upside in lying to your audience. And it also, in an obvious way, it allows you to use the advertiser's name. I mean, some of the sponsored content that goes on BuzzFeed doesn't actually have the advertiser's name in it. They're just there as presented by or brought to you by, just like I did at the beginning of this slide, saying it's brought to you by AMPA. It's no different than that. But if I just pretended like I walked in off the street and sat down here and was talking to you guys and you hadn't paid me and I wasn't getting paid, we'd be lying. I would still probably have done this anyway, though.
What do you think about the brought to you by tagline at the top of the article, online with a link and a logo to their site? And that's something that Mashable, I guess, does a lot.
I love it because it is what it is. I mean, I think that's great. And, yeah, I like that a lot.
Are there any benchmarks for websites, Facebook, et cetera, as to when you can start charging?
Yes, and it's in my purse, which I didn't bring. So basically, like 100,000 page views and, oh, you know what? I wonder if I can get this because it was really well done. Like 100,000 page views and you don't have, you've got a website, 100,000 uniques, and you can probably get them to return your phone call. And then when it's like 250,000 uniques, you can probably begin to do some sponsored posting. But it's tough. It's really tough, and it's crowded out there. So, I keep going back to those 3 things, which is, does it fit my brand? Who are the people out there whose messages I want to tell, who have the same attitude I do, and then just figure out a way in which you can work together. So it may be the kind of idea where it's brought to you by, and you get the sponsor. They basically pay to have their logo or their brand associated with your brand, and that's a very simple one, very simple one. Okay, do you think sponsored content can work for literary magazines? Oh, Jen, really interesting. So I think the brain pickings model is probably the best one to look at there. I think because there's a certain enthusiasm that you have and a certain expertise that you have for your subject that makes you an expert, that makes your magazine an expert. And I don't honestly see a problem with you doing some of that, as long as you're not, promoting a writing workshop that you would never attend, or you're not. If you want, maybe you could send me an email and I could help you. We could just sit down and brainstorm some ways for you to fulsomely bring in that opportunity to connect your readers with your sponsors or your audience. I'd be really interested in doing that.
Shelley, there was a follow-up question to the answer about benchmarks for websites, and it was, is that per month, the number of hits that you mentioned, or views?
Yeah, it's per month. And I mean, it's all just a big game, right? It's just a big, big game. And it was supposed to be this, if I give you A, then you will give me B. So if I can prove that I have, 1 million unique views, you will give me $1 million. And it just isn't working that way anymore. And I think that, for those of us who've never had 1 million page views, it'll be a lot easier for us to move forward, knowing that it doesn't mean anything that it will be for some of the traditional publishers who still believe, but look at all my page views. And they're getting their page views off, look at Heidi Klum's breasts. Like, that is not an engaged audience. I don't care. They'll go somewhere else to find cleavage.
I see that there's some questions coming in, but I just have one question for you, Shelley. So how do you avoid pitfalls like the Atlantic and the Church of Scientology problem? You'd mentioned the Good Sheriff. You'd also mentioned guidelines. Are there any basic guidelines that people should stick to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it is common sense, and it's very difficult for me to understand how the Scientology thing could have happened. I mean, it's got this big, huge, red thing on it that says, oh my God, they're trying to buy, good PR at a time when they really need it in a magazine that should be covering it from the opposite perspective. So the sheriff thing, I think, is really important. That and I love. I mean, I'm of the people that I was working with at Swerve. I was very close to the ad sales people and very close to their clients. And I think that you ad salespeople will not sell out their mother. I mean, if they want to be in the business a long time, they really are in it for long term. And you just have to have conversations and sit down and say, do you really want to do this? Is this really the best way forward? I think that it starts with whoever the editorial staff is, really looking at what the opportunities are, really crafting them in the most. And I use the word fulsome in a very strategic way, which means you also need to bring your A game to this. You need to guide these opportunities for your advertisers. You need to be the person setting the boundaries, setting what can be done and what can't be done. Listening, learning from mistakes. We all make mistakes. I mean, I know that there's been many times in my career that I've run things that I wish I hadn't, that had a price tag attached to them. But there's also some times where I could have done more and I could have reached readers in other ways. I mean, the idea of engaging with readers at events, Anthropology is reaching out in local communities right now to different bloggers and saying, come and do a DIY project. Uppercase Magazine, which is an AMPA member, I mean, they've done them. Yuppie Love has done them. It's such a win, right? You get the imprinter of Anthropology. They get a DIYer to come in and do their blogs or do an event, and then at some point that brand might pay you to actually do the event or cover your supplies, at which point then you can say I was featured in. I mean, it's kind of a rolling criteria for success for everybody that we all are trying to get into here. But, you got to roll with it. You can't roll against it. Okay. I'm intrigued by sponsored content that's just great content. The athlete profile or 11 things no one wants you to see. Do you find that to be a hard sell to advertisers? Honestly, for the most part, yes, because they're business people. They're not content creators. They're this is not the world that they feel. That's why they've come to you to some extent, but everybody feels like they should be able to, it's weird, right? Like, so yes, it's very hard, but I think that when you have a great relationship or you can show the engagement that you have on your website, you can say, look, I really know my readers. I can put money in your cash register. Trust me. And then maybe, you do one experiment together and then you build on that. But it is ultimately about a relationship and about trust and about success. Okay, aside from just building audience for publishing startups, exactly, are there some efforts you can do early on that can help position your blog as a relevant for an advertiser to work with? Absolutely, and it's all about, I think in that case, it's about buzz. And again, I keep saying that word engagement. That's what forward-thinking marketers and forward-thinking brands are looking for. They want to see how many comments are on your website. They want to see that you're out in the community. They want to see that you're there on Twitter. They want to see that you're there on Facebook. Now, some of that I know is just noise and it's busy work, and it's very uncomfortable for a lot of us to promote ourselves, but you need to be out there. You need to be have some kind of profile. You need to present yourself as an expert in some way. You need to have small successes that you can then turn around and say, and I could do this for you. One weird example that we tried at Swerve was we had a long-term relationship with one of the home builders here in Calgary. And we were doing they took a chance on us, right? You know, we were not, when Swerve was just starting out, which I really liked. And we ended up doing a dinner party in one of their show homes. And I brought in, a wine expert. I brought in a chef. We had a reader contest to come to the dinner party. We did it as a story. It was not in any way sponsored. They didn't buy an ad around it. They just basically opened up their show home to us. And it was a real win-win for both of us. It wasn't huge. It was small. But they got feedback from that, from their audience of, hey, I actually saw a show home in action. I think if I were to do it again, I would have made it paid. I would have made this one of those opportunities that only a really creative magazine could bring to a business. So you're looking for those things that, you get it. Like, you have access to all these people. How can you then bundle that, bring it to an advertiser, do something that, has really clear benchmarks? So you don't want to over-deliver or over-promise. You want to just basically make it stand out from the crowd of people who say, hi, I'm an ad guy, I have a magazine, I have a blog, give me $1,000, goodbye. That's part of it. And it's hard, it's labor intensive, but in many ways, and I think in a perfect world, this might be a really good chance to stop, is that we're all in it for creating content or creating opportunities or experiences for readers that obviously our advertisers and our sponsors want to be part of. They want into our world. We just have to make sure that when they get here, we're not just, shaking them down for their money and then sending them on their way, that they feel like they have a seat at the table, but it's the right seat, that it certainly isn't at the head of the table. And that's way too many metaphors. I hope you guys have gotten stuff out of this. It really is just a moving target right now. There's so much coming out. My email is youngblatt@mac.com. I'd be really happy to just talk further, maybe brainstorm some ideas for you. I'd like to be part of the solution here. I'd like to see us all do some really great things moving forward. So thank you. Yes. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Shelley. Our participants are already saying thank you. That was well done and full of information. It was abundant with information. So just a reminder to everyone who's still with us that you will receive a recording in a PowerPoint, which is great because when people go to execute it, they have you as a reference. Shelley actually has one more point. Just hold on a sec.
Sorry, guys. When they send out the slideshow, I also have a really thorough list of guidelines around custom content that someone independent has come up with that I think is great, and I will forward that